We start with tragic news coming out of Afghanistan. 26 people were killed and 18 others injured in a suicide blast in Kabul in Afghanistan. The blast took place near a Shia shrine in the Afghan capital. Kabul, remember, is celebrating NOWRUZ, which marks the beginning of the Persian New Year. Despite repeated assurances from the government about security, the threat from terrorists still looms large in the metro cities of Afghanistan. Joining me live on the broadcast for more on this story is Daniele Pagani. He's joining us from Amman in Jordan. Daniele, good afternoon. You, of course, have spent time in Afghanistan. You understand the situation in Kabul. Tell us why NOWRUZ would be a particular interest to terrorist activities in Afghanistan.
Good afternoon to you, Ash, and good afternoon to all our viewers. It will be a particular target because every year in Afghanistan there is a public debate over NOWRUZ. It's considered not to be a properly Islamic celebration by both the Taliban and the Islamic State, which unfortunately has become more and more active in Afghanistan. But not only terrorist organizations criticize NOWRUZ, it is also criticized by some hardliners active within the conservative parties of Afghanistan. So it would have been a perfect target both for a religious interpretation of the festival and also for a strategic reason. Of course, it means that when people celebrate such a festival, which remains very much celebrated in Afghanistan, perhaps the most cheered festival of the country, all people gather, and therefore it's easy, unfortunately, to find the civilian targets. Reports are talking about at least 25 people dead. It was not a car bomber as we initially thought. It was a suicide bomber who blew himself up among a group of people who were leaving the celebrations for NOWRUZ.
Right, and Daniele, the government had given assurances that, you know, the security and safety of revelers for NOWRUZ had been taken into consideration, and yet something like this happens in the capital of Afghanistan. Does this indicate the degree to which the IS and the Taliban are operating within Afghanistan, and perhaps also security or intelligence failures that have allowed this to happen?
Yes to both your observations. It's not this particular attack that tells us that the security is deteriorating in Afghanistan and that it seems impossible for the central government and the intelligence agencies to actually grant safety to the citizens. Remember that from May 2017, repeatedly the capital city of Afghanistan has been targeted by major attacks where even hundreds of civilians have been killed. This is the government can say what it wants, but this is the proof of a situation which seems impossible to control deep down to the streets, the neighborhoods, the courtyards, and the celebrations happening in Kabul. And this is making the population more and more afraid. Unfortunately, fear brings along a lot of danger. And on these kind of danger and frustration, organizations like the Taliban can kind of sell themselves as a stability factor and gather more and more consensus, and this is a problem for Afghanistan and for the fight that the government is bearing against the Taliban and other terrorist organizations.
Right, and the government itself is embattled in many ways, Daniele. Obviously, these terror groups are trying to take advantage of, let's say, the fact that things are in flux in Afghanistan, given the United States and the recent statements it's made about its South Asia strategy. Can you help us understand, contextualize for us, really speaking, the developments that have taken place as far as Western engagement with Afghanistan goes on the front of terror, on engagement with Taliban as far as talks go as well?
Yes, so the strategy when it comes to the United States of America is more troops, selective engagement against the enemy, which means putting up a small forward groups of attacks, but still it means increasing the NATO presence in Afghanistan, and this plays a fundamental role in the propaganda machine of the Taliban. Basically, the Taliban can say that the West is only increasing the number of troops and not proposing a peaceful solution for Afghanistan, and they are ready to talk only if the West goes away. So as long as the United States of America have the only strategy of fighting,
right.
the Taliban have a powerful propaganda too. When it comes to the government is not in control of more than 50% of the country, Aisha, which means that the troops on the ground are not responding to the government to a certain extent. And the Afghan National Army, beside being made by brave young Afghans who try to survive and fight on the front lines, is a tired and injured body, and often hardly can take any more bullets, and therefore sometimes doesn't even engage with the Taliban's advance.
Right. Stay with me a while longer, Daniele. Abdullah Fahimi, a researcher at the Abu Rayhan University, is joining us from Kabul on the broadcast as well. Thank you very much for speaking with us, Mr. Fahimi. Given what's happened today, yet another attack in Kabul, yet another suicide attack, 26 civilians killed, do you fear that the situation as it stands right now is only poised to deteriorate further unless a consensus is arrived at very quickly on how to deal with terror organizations and a way forward in terms of a peace accord in Afghanistan?
Thank you for having me. Yes, we had a very tragic incident today in which more than or around 26 people were killed. Probably the number of casualties is right. But yet, these attacks, we expect that these attacks will increase in the summer because that is normally the fighting season for the Taliban and all the other terrorists. Inside of the government of Afghanistan, they have done what they were supposed to do. They have proposed a peace agreement with the Taliban. But we can see in practice that this is the response of the Taliban and the other terrorist groups. They respond to peace proposals with bomb blasts, with suicide attacks.
Right. And if I can ask you, if you were to pinpoint a reason for the possibility of this situation deteriorating further, what would that be, Mr. Fahimi?
Sorry, can you repeat what you said? I didn't catch the last one.
I wanted to ask you if you could pinpoint one reason as to why you think the situation is going to get worse. What would that reason be? Yes.
I believe that the situation will get worse because the opponents of the current government of Afghanistan, the terrorist groups, the Taliban regime, they all believe that they can come to a victory, a military victory. They can achieve a military victory over the Afghan government. That is why they are pursuing with more suicide attacks, more attacks in general. They target soft targets and they also target the military bases. They believe that they can win this war, and they believe that they can win it militarily too. So that is why they don't want to surrender. And as a matter of fact, they are on a surge. They are gaining more territory. They are gaining more control and remote areas. That's why this is a kind of stalemate, and any side wants to win. So if these sides want to win, they want to fight. That is why I think it's going to get worse.
Abdullah Fahimi, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon and sharing your perspective with us on this story. My colleague Daniele Pagani stays with us. Before I go across to him, let me quickly take our viewers through the details of what we've learned so far. 26 people have been killed and 18 others have been injured in a suicide blast in Afghanistan, in the capital Kabul. This blast took place near a Shia shrine in the Afghan capital. Remember, celebrations for NOWRUZ, marking the beginning of the Persian New Year, are on in Afghanistan, and despite repeated assurances from the government about security, the threat from terrorists still looms large in the metro cities of Afghanistan.